Buick Centurion. I'll explain what those are next. And I get asked all the time, what kind of car do you got? And I say it's a Buick Centurion. And everybody looks at me like I'm crazy. What's a Centurion? I've never heard of that. So I'm going to explain to you what they are. But to explain what one is, we got to go back and do a little history lesson. So in the early 60s, all the General Motors makes started coming out with performance versions of cars. And you know, you think Impala SS, the Pontiac Super Duty, the Superjet 88. Buick came out with a car in 1962 called the Wildcat. And one thing Buick did different, the Wildcat and the LeSabre were two different cars. Even though they were the same platform, same body style, they both were B bodies. Buick actually made a designation that it's not a LeSabre Wildcat, it was just a Wildcat. You know, unlike the Impala SS and stuff, you know, where it's still an Impala, it's just a higher performance version of the Impala. These were actually their own model. Now in '62, Buick came out with the Wildcat, and it was the more performance version of the B body, and it was its own model. And when you got to the Wildcat, it came with more trim, a little bit more performance options, different interior, and standard big engine. 62, you still could get this big block in the LeSabre too and stuff, but as those continued on, they started making big differences in them. 63, you got kind of a whole different front end stuff, and a lot of different trim. Big block was standard still. You still get the LeSabre with the big block in it. They actually started making the front ends of them longer, of the actual Wildcat. They were usually 3 inches longer. Standard big block. 64, they actually got away from the big block in the LeSabre. You couldn't get it. You had to step up to the Wildcat, and that ran as a thing all the way to 69. So about 69 comes along, and they quit doing the longer front end. But they still had a lot different trim. They still had the standard big block, and so forth. By 70, they actually started making a LeSabre back with a big block. But still, the Wildcat meant standard big block, standard, all the performance options, the nicer interior, the nicer trim, and all that. But you could still get, you actually could still, they started putting the 455, the big block engines in the LeSabres that year as an option. So in 1971, Buick decided to drop the Wildcat nameplate, but they still continued to make a big block, a full-size car, high performance car, a sporty version of the B body. And that car was the Centurion. Now, Centurion only won from 71 through 73. So they're kind of a rare bird. They're not like, you know, you can't go find them everywhere. They didn't sell as many as they did the previous years. So, now, first I'm going to talk about the 71 and the 72 because they're a lot alike. 73 got a lot of stuff took away because it was like the last year. And a lot of the things that made them unique kind of went away in 73. Exterior wise, a Centurion had quite a few differences than its sister LeSabre. You actually had two LeSabres in 71, 72, 73. You actually had a regular LeSabre, which had no trim, was a cheap model. Basically their version of the Biscayne or Bel Air or whatever you want to say. Then you had the LeSabre Custom, which came with a little spear down the side and a little bit nicer interior, had like a diamond pattern and so forth, and a few more options on it. And like I said, you could get the big block in any of those years. They started actually offering big blocks in almost everything by the late 70s there. I mean by the late 60s, early 70s. So, however, the Centurion, the thing with the Centurion is it had obviously different badges, but it also had its own unique grille. It did not share with the LeSabres. It's 71 and 72. Like I said, 73 is a little different. We'll talk about it in a bit. The other thing on the outside that's unique to a Centurion, there's no vent ports on a Centurion. They're the only full-size car that Buick offered that actually did not have the vent ports on the hood. The other weird thing is, in 71 and 72, they all have vinyl tops, and they all had a different back window. You'll notice the LeSabre has a more bubbly back window. You can see right here, Centurion only has a plug that sits in there and makes a smaller, more sporty back window. The performance theme. All Centurions in 71 and 72 actually had standard big blocks. Like I said, we'll talk about the 73. It kind of was the last hurrah, and a lot of things got changed. And that's the difference in the exterior. Now, anybody that's ever wondered too, also between a 71 and 72 B body, the big difference is right here, rub strips. 71s had an all chrome bumper, the 72s didn't. Now the grills are different in the 71s and 72s as well. The rest of the cars are pretty much the same, other than a little piece of trim over the taillight. But the easiest way to tell is the rub strip. But now, Centurions too had no, they also had like a little extra piece of trim back here, and they had no badging on them except that said Buick, except for the piece in the grill. There was no other Buick badges on these cars on the exterior. Now we talked about the outside, the inside. So the LeSabre, the plain LeSabre would have had a real plain door panel, wouldn't have had all this tuck and roll. And then the Sport Custom would have had like a diamond pattern, but it still was a lot plainer. And the tuck and roll was a lot plainer on the base LeSabre, and the more upscale ones would have had the diamond pattern the Custom would. None of them had the flip down armrest. That's kind of unique to the Centurion. And you know, the Centurion was a more upscale model. It was considered a performance luxury car, so it was a little more equipped than the actual custom LeSabre. You could get a lot of the options, but you couldn't get them as equipped as you can a Centurion. Now, I said I'd talk about the 73s, and the 73s was the last hurrah of the Centurion. So now the difference in the 73, the things that made the uniqueness of like the 71 and 72 kind of went away. One other thing I forgot to mention on the 71s before I get over to the 73s. Also, one thing the 71s did have, and that's probably, the 72s are actually my favorite, but the one thing I do like about the 71s over the 72, they had louvers in the trunk back here for that fresh air system that only ran 1 year. All General Motors big cars had that. In 71, 72s did not, because it caused leaks or something of that nature. I'm not really sure. They had problems with it and they took it out, but it really looked cool. Now let's get on to the 73s. Like I mentioned, 73 lost a lot of its uniqueness from the Centurion. The big thing it lost the fact that it was standard with a 455. You could actually get a 350 Centurion in 1973, and that's the only year you could get it. So realistically, that's probably the rarest ones, but I don't know anybody would want a small block over a big block. The difference in 73, where this says Centurion right here, if it was a 455, it would have had the 455 badge on it, and it would just said Centurion like this on the 350 cars in 73. All the 72s just had a Centurion badge in 71 because they were standard 455 cars. Now, the other thing that the Centurions in 72 did, or 73 did, I mean, they didn't have this custom back window. They had the regular LeSabre glass. Which, you know, that's not effective if you get a convertible. Centurions, you could get them in 2 doors, 4 doors, and convertibles. Only hardtop cars, you could not get a sedan. The 2 doors all were like this. The convertible was all 2 doors, obviously. And the 4 doors. Now, the 4 door didn't get the special glass. That's one thing. You could get a 4 door. And they made one car that was actually a 3-speed on the column. It's the only one. I don't know where it's at now. And it was a 71. But getting back to the 73s, you lost on the hardtops, two-door hardtops, the special glass. The hood still didn't have the vent ports. That was still a thing. But the 73 grills didn't get a unique grill for the Centurion. They were all the same grills, all the same bumpers. So realistically, they kept it for 1 year, but it really lost the things that made it an actual performance car. You had to just special ops it, and the things that made it different. So 73 is kind of like the last hurrah, and it was kind of just not the car that the 71s and 72s are. And by 74, the Centurion was done. The LeSabre Custom, I think, was done in 74, and it became the LeSabre Luxus. Pretty sure up to 74 was the last hurrah for even the Custom. And the LeSabre Luxus was more like the LeSabre Custom. It was, you could get the big block, obviously, but it didn't have special hood, a special back window. The performance era full-size cars had kind of died by 74. Now the weird thing about Buick is too, you know, 1969 was probably the last hurrah for like a lot of the big full-size performance cars. Chevrolet stopped the SS69. I think the Superjet was gone. All that was obsolete, but Buick kept their cars on for a longer period. And like I said, they're the most unique because they said, hey, we're gonna make it its own model. It's not a LeSabre with some pretty badging and a big engine. So these are probably one of the rarest cars that Buick actually built. You know, obviously each year they were different, but Centurions, my car here, it's a rare bird. And the reason is, it had AM FM radio, but it's got hand crank windows, no tilt, no cruise, no power windows, no power locks, manual trunk, had air conditioning. But the one thing it did have, 342 gears and a positive traction rear end from the factory. So I don't know if somebody got this car and said, hey, it was just like the one that came out of the factory, let's build it like it's a fast car. So, but they did, and I'm thankful for that, but that's kind of a rare setup, as most of these cars, that would have been probably the last option they concerned about, being these were more high-end cars. Most of them would have had power windows, locks, tilt, cruise. Even an 8-track, this one just had the AM FM radio. I don't even know if you could get that, just the AM. I know your dad's car has the AM, but I don't know. And these, you can get it only had, and weird thing is, I looked in the thing, it only had option for a speaker on that side. It didn't have speakers on both sides from the factory. It looked like somebody took it out, but that was an option. That was the other option they got, was the right side speaker. Weird, I know. But like I said, I think this car is really one they picked out just to be kind of a hot rod of the hot rod car. So it's kind of cool. Granted, I'm probably not going to keep it all original because that's just not me. It's kind of cool that they did that. So, but now you know what one of these guys are and why they're a rare. So it's next time somebody asks you, hey, what is a Buick Centurion? You can explain to them, hey, that's Buick's high performance full-size car. Now, one thing I did mention about the Wildcat, they actually did make a GS Wildcat 1 year, 1965. And it was the cream of the crop. But that's the only year they made a GS and a Wildcat. They didn't make anything GS. This is what you got if you wanted to say, I want the high performance, the sport version. This is what you got in 1971, 72, and in 73, even though the 73s were kind of limited. But that's it. Just want to explain that to you. That way you guys would know what I'm talking about when I say Centurion and be like, not really understand what they are. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll have another video out, actually one working on the car, but this is just a little something extra I threw out here. Like I said, appreciate you guys watching. We're 282 subscribers. Like, share, and subscribe, and we should be rigging this guy up some more tomorrow.